Okay, we are complete. Let's start. Hello to Tuesday meeting on Tuesday, 21st of January. Usual agenda without any update from our working group. We plan to start with the updates next week.
But wait, that's a missed opportunity. We have Joseph here. Like he joined the meeting. Wow.
I want to make the joke also at the beginning. Oh, you are prepared, Joseph. Always, always. So action items from last week. We had the first one, but this one look into how we can apply existing CF roles to multiple CF orgs. But afterwards, we discussed different options for the new Concourse working group. And there was one question about whether we can move the Concourse repositories in the CF, in the CloudFoundry organization. I think Derek wanted to look into this. So he provided at least an answer to the question, how many repositories? Hi, Derek.
Y'all are very timely. Already into it. Sorry for being late.
Oh, fine. I was just iterating over the action items, and this is most of the items are for you.
So I'm happy to talk through it. So look into how to apply existing CF roles to multiple CF orgs. I only loosely looked at that action. I had a bunch of other things going on last week that were coming to a head too.
This is more for us. We will work on the automation because we know you don't need to care about this.
Yeah. Okay. For right now, that sounds reasonable. So in terms of the action items that were mine, is that what you wanted me to speak to? I'm happy to talk through them a little bit. Cool. Amelia shook her head, so I'll just take it as a runaway. So I did an inventory on the Concourse repos. I did it loosely as a what's been getting updated in the past year and a half to 2 years, which I took loosely as a useful enough marker for being a part of how people interact with some of the tools, or the tools interact with one another for certain things. So it's about 32 repositories, give or take. And what would the potential impact be? So this is one that I spent a little bit of time talking with folks on the Concourse side, and admittedly some of the folks just in general in this space. I'd like to keep the org. I think the complexity is not necessarily technical of moving it over, but I think the grouping makes sense to keep that disambiguation, sorry, not distinguishment, disambiguation between the project and product that is Concourse and the other things that are in CloudFoundry, similar to how Paketo has kept things separate. Like it's useful grouping mechanism that you lose when you move those things across. And I think it's just simpler in that way. So there's one of the things I'm hoping to do is to help bootstrap some of the automation thoughts. I know there was two things. There was how do we update our automation, and two is in the CFF, it's update automation and update RFCs and definitions around what does it mean to be a contributor, like that expansion in that context. I'm happy to help with some of the initial thoughts on the automation. I think I would like help or other folks to maybe, if we're comfortable with that, approach the RFC aspect. If that's generally palatable. Joseph, you were going to say something, and I just talked right through you.
I was going to say that there might also be a good technical reason. I don't know what the current state of Golang is, but I know when we moved Diego from Incubator to CloudFoundry, the import paths was kind of a nightmare that made us create a whole system for dealing with it. So like we're not using that system in Concourse, so it would probably be a new nightmare unless Go has changed dramatically. which it has, but I don't know if it's changed to help
Yeah,
us
I don't
here.
know how well the redirects work in the Go tool chain at this point, and like all that kind of stuff. Maybe not.
But like, yeah, that's another reason why just keeping it separate probably less of a headache, and like you always have the option of moving it later if we're like, it'd be better.
So that was kind of a combination of 2 and 3, I guess.
Yeah.
So what I'm taking as an action is on myself for next week, ideally, is to have a draft PR that starts addressing some of the automation changes.
The automation changes, our automation changes which are owned by the TOC, or Concourse automation changes?
By CF, the CF automation changes. So just like draft PR that starts expanding the idea of multiple orgs, right? So I'm not gonna, because the Concourse will just, what I'd like to do if we're kind of moving in this direction is say that Concourse's governance is not going to necessarily, we can separate what is the acceptance of the working group and the ability to actually automate the governance of that, and just kind of keep those two paths separate, but make sure that we're having forward progress, and from our perspective, contributing to the fact that we're expanding the definition of some of these things and not making it just work that the CFF has to take on to expand the tooling capability to enable that.
So yeah, if you want to look into that, the automation.
Ruben's already sent me a bunch of the links and things. He bombarded me last time, and I just haven't had a chance to actually do something about it. But I've been reading through it a little bit, trying to wrap my head around what it does do already.
Yeah. All right. If the most know-how about org management has Stephan in the call, Stephan Merker. Yeah, if you have questions, I've been working most of the time in the inactive user, but I think this is a second priority. We need first maybe the org automation, and then inactive user check. Yeah, could be also as a second step extended. Yeah, if you already know where to look, great.
Maybe we can start with discussing about these changes in the RFCs. So what are actually GitHub members, etc.? What would it mean for multiple orgs? Which changes are needed? And from then on, we can decide which will be the source files where such stuff is maintained, which part can be generated, and then the implementation finally is probably not that difficult.
Yeah. That sounds good.
Yeah. Makes sense first to agree on how we want to have it. Okay. I think there were no other discussions in the PR. We opened to create a new working group. So
yeah, I need to go ahead and I think add the folks that were proposed. I'm happy to do that today. I have a conversation. The other action item we had that maybe we just didn't write it down was a conversation with me and Chris around the what to do with the Concourse CI/CD and some of the things going on there in terms of how that sits with Foundation versus Broadcom right now and all that kind of stuff. But Chris, I don't know if you wanted to yoke the RFC and those things together necessarily.
Let's just chat tomorrow with David and
Okay.
kind of talk about those things. Then we can add things to the RFC as needed. As far as the initial contribution goes too, I mean, we could just transfer ownership of the existing GitHub org, and then at a, at some soonish date, migrate them over into CloudFoundry org if we want to do that. So I think those two things could be separated.
Or if
So
something
migrate. We just said we're not going to migrate, right? Or did you?
We're not going to do the second thing, but I think what
Okay.
I'm hearing is we do an RFC acceptance, and then we would transfer upon acceptance of that. We would do the org ownership migration.
Yeah, that's certainly
Seems like a reasonable.
Yeah, I like that.
Okay.
So the only blocker for that is the updating the RFCs, right, to allow for multiple orgs, and then we are good to go.
Oh, we need an RFC to support multiple orgs, which then explains. I don't know.
Sure, one of
Also need.
those options.
Yeah. I didn't write that as an action item because it's for all of us. This is just edit a point into any other business discussion. Okay. If there is nothing else around Concourse, then we can start with the board. Okay, it doesn't seem to be any other open topic. So dashboard, the first one, inactive users to be deleted. So we waited 2 weeks here, so this is good to go. There is only one user who will be deleted. Okay, thanks. We discussed the addition of the Concourse working group, and there is a new one about archiving Service Fabric repositories. So I reached out to people at SAP currently working on the project. So they would like to keep the repositories for another 2-3 months. I asked them to put information here, but this is not yet the case. They will come with more information.
Because do they also have like someone who wants to lead that group then?
Yeah, are the people you spoke to the people who are approvers in that group? I don't
Yes,
recognize the names.
Yeah, they are the approvers in the suggested projects. So yeah. What was the question, Ruben?
Yeah, like is any of these approvers interested in running the working group?
I didn't ask this question. Are they
Because
done?
I think that no, there's other parts in the working group, but I think like there's less and less activity in the working group altogether.
Mm-hmm.
So I think like one of the underlying motivations for Marcella is I don't know, trying to gradually work towards deprecating the working group.
Mm-hmm.
But if like someone from Service Fabric says we need to keep the working group or the area, then maybe they can also step up to help maintain the working group.
Mm-hmm. I can ask. So basically, they switched to complete new approach, most probably they won't be interested, but I can ask.
Yeah, but if they are not interested, then I don't know. It would also be good. That to me is a signal that maybe this area should
Yeah.
still be archived, right? Like, or at least a timeline should be given.
Mhm.
And also, archiving doesn't mean that the repos are gone, right? Like, and if there's no activity, then I don't know what the impact is, right? Like,
Yeah, I
not
can.
like we're deleting the repos.
Yeah, yeah. Let me clarify with the people. I just asked them about archiving. Maybe they are not aware that the repositories are still there after archiving. But during the CloudFoundry day, there was interest around service broker, the OSB API evolution. I didn't hear anything in that direction after CloudFoundry day.
Me neither.
Yeah, we have to check about what we do with the service open OSB API
Yeah.
repos. But yeah, I will check. This sounds like an action item. And we can go to the RFCs. I don't know why is this not updated. Interesting. Something is not working with our project board. At least I have to check. So this is still no updates on bindable secret resources. I have to check. So there is no activity, still the same state. We don't need to discuss anything. I will check. There are open discussions which are not updated yet. What are the plans here with this one? After, I think this was fighting for app manifest v2 one to be accepted, and now maybe also the file-based service bindings, there is an initial implementation. We'll check on that. And there is a new RFC. Sorry?
I could put it on the agenda for the next working group meeting, which is next Tuesday, but after the TOC meeting. So in 2 weeks, we may have an update.
Yeah, we'll be maybe, so maybe it makes more sense to discuss deeply on that, not just asking via message. Yeah, I think we can wait 2 weeks. It's not a problem if you can make it agenda point. Yeah.
Yeah, we'll do.
Okay, thanks. And there is a new RFC. Most probably, Josef, you are joining the call because of that, or?
Hi, it's me. You may know me from other failed RFCs, such as Bosch template rendering. This is the follow-up to that, because nobody wanted to do that because they were like, we do a bunch of property validation in our template rendering. So this is a different solution to property validation, which is let's support property validation rather than letting you do whatever you want in ERB. So looking at several options, the best one I could find was I think somebody recommended somewhere else using something like JSON schema, which is just a generic JSON sort of schema of like that lets you define what you want your properties validated against. It's a large toolbox of stuff that release authors would have access to. It is versioned, so the initial plan would be to support the 2020-12 version, which is the latest draft, but it would let us sort of move forward without release authors breaking every time we sort of supported a new version. It's got, you know, these things are required. These things are required if those things are here. These are if then else logic, several different types. Big thing it does not have any support for is certificates, but it is extensible to several degrees. They have the newer drafts have this concept of meta schemas where it's like this is rather than referencing the main 2020-12 schema, you're like, no, here's the meta schema I support. And that has like that one plus some stuff we define. That sounds crazy. And I don't think we want to go that direction because it's weird. At least unless people have different opinions, but it seemed weird. But there's nothing that prevents you in these libraries. I picked a Ruby gem that was supported the most recent draft from just adding new types. It's like, oh, we want to support a type called certificate, and these are the keywords that we're going to validate against. So it lets us define sort of additional layers on top of the schema. There's then a question which needs some comments as far as like what types of additional things do we want to support, like single certificates, multiple certificates, the key and the certificate are actually like match each other, things like that, which probably have all sorts of edge cases and problems if my certificate actually contains multiple certificates, and figure out what we want to do. The by far most complicated thing I found was in the GoRouter job, there is not really things that are validating that the properties are valid for GoRouter, but there's a set of properties that come in that provide a set of rules to validate other properties against other certificates. It's like these certificates over here should match these rules that I'm passing in as properties here, which seems like we could build something that does that, but it seems like it's going to apply exactly to this one specific instance and not be generally applicable to more than one release author. So I don't think this is something we want to support. It's something that could maybe be pushed into a pre-start script or something at a later date in the effort of getting rid of the ERB, but or it's something that we could in theory drop and be like, no, actually this is a problem that you should solve before properties get to the manifest if you want to check that they apply, some rules apply to them. But otherwise, everything I found in JSON schema seemed like it would solve at least 99% of the problems that release authors are currently using template rendering to try to solve for property validation.
Do you
Nice.
have an
Is that
example
okay.
of what this would look like for a simple example, not a?
I do. Like really, really simple. How about that? If you want to let me share for a second, I can show my test schema that I did for OSConf release, which was not for the whole release, but just for like a single property to make sure it would actually work. You know, you define your schema, top level is always going to be object, and then, oh, it's got properties. There's a login banner property. It's also an object and it's got properties. That property needs to be, that property is called text and it's of type string. And that's just basically validating this property here, which is, it's verbose. Especially at the more levels you get nested, you're going to get more of these levels of nesting in there. But it does give you, you know, there's a lot of different use cases that people are trying to solve. So it gives you that flexibility. There was talk of like, how do we incorporate this into the actual spec itself rather than a separate property schema file? The verboseness of it, though, makes that sort of difficult to like, how do we incorporate that? Like we could take those pieces and break them up and put them in here. And then we're like going to have to reconstruct a JSON schema from the spec. But then it's like, then you're moving away from what JSON schema is. And it seemed like that's going to more not give release authors a go look over here. You can do anything over here. It's like, look over there and then take pieces of that and merge it into your spec, which is a little bit more confusing.
What does your template look like here?
I didn't look at that. There's presumably nothing interesting going on here. It was mostly just this is just a login banner for the OS.
So the
conference.
templating wouldn't change.
No, this does not affect templating. This is to give the release authors a new tool so they can get the validation out of the templating. So then we can replace the templating in a future RFC that will be undrafted.
Sorry, Ruben, I interrupted.
Oh, Ruben. I'm going to unshare.
Okay.
So we can go back to
Is there
the
a
other.
point? So I know how we don't want to go from spec to, or I can see reasons why we wouldn't want to go from spec to the file, the schema. Is that sufficiently extensible in terms of the metadata you could put in that schema that you could go the inverse direction, where you could have just the schema JSON and that generates a spec file that we could use?
You certainly could, and that could be a direction we go, because like I believe JSON schema has the concept of defaults, which is kind of weird because it's not actually generating the thing.
Right.
It's metadata in there, and for the most part, you can put anything in JSON schema, and like it just gets ignored. Like you can specify whatever type you want, and JSON schema is not gonna be like, I don't know what this. It's like, sure, fine. So for the most part, it's only looking at the keywords and values that it knows about. So you can do whatever you want there. But I also, my gut reaction is that like, you look at, OS conf release, you saw like it's one property is 14 lines of schema. Like some of the bigger releases trying to figure out what properties do I need to specify would get kind of complicated.
Yeah.
Some
The JSON schema, it's not readable, right? Like already for this one example, I don't know, I zoned out. And I think that means that someone is gonna create a tool to generate JSON schema from a spec file, which I think is a big tell that probably JSON schema is not, I don't know, it shouldn't be the primary format, right? Because I don't know, people are probably gonna extend their spec file to generate the underlying JSON schema thing.
Maybe, but definitely there's a lot of the advanced validation that releases are doing. You're not going to be able to do those sorts of things in a small grammar, especially though like, oh, when this property is here, then this property needs to be an object or an array or whatnot filled with these things. Like those are the types of validations that, my original pass at this was like, let's just put some rules in the spec file. And I came up with a set of rules and people were kind of like, yeah, you're inventing a whole thing here that people are going to have to know. Why don't you go with a tool that already exists? And they pointed me at JSON schema or things like it. But, we could definitely go for an intermediate. So a couple of fun things mentioned in the RFC a little bit. But this handles Bosh deploy, but Bosh create env means we have to implement it a second time in the Bosh CLI. Maybe we just only implement it in the Bosh CLI. That doesn't work at all. That would be fun. But you can't do it only in the Bosh CLI because a lot of properties are like CredHub values, and you don't know if those values are valid until the director resolves them. So you really have to do it very late, almost right before template rendering. So some wrenches into the problem, but sort of just the fact that we have JSON schema means that we can pick up a Ruby library for the director and a Go library for the CLI, and they should work fundamentally the same way, although we will have to implement our special certificate things in both spots. But
if I was adding this to routing release, right? Let's say Go Router, our most complicated validations. I'm like, well, those are some rough validations. Could we do it like for the easy ones first, just validate all the easy ones, and then like, one by one, pick off the difficult ones and move them where they need to go?
yes, JSON schema is a set of things. Well, and then there's a bunch of things in JSON schema. You can have like multiple sets of rules, like, oh, all of these rules for this property, or an or rule. There's like ands and ors and things. But by default, sort of like, it doesn't care about all the properties in it. It only cares about the ones that you mention. So you can easily add validation for particular things, and it's going to be like, no, this doesn't match, and just like ignore everything else. So very easy to do.
So it can be a nice partial, like doing bits at a time.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like that part.
Yeah. We discussed this in our working group meeting last week and decided to go with an RFC to get more feedback from people. It's mostly work which will be done in our working group, and others, if they want to adopt it, they need to adjust push releases. But
yeah, and the actual work to do it, I don't know. I did a few hours and it works in the Bosch director. It's not it actually took far more time to figure out where in the Bosch director you had to put it because of the property getting the values out of credit and everything to get it in the right spot. But the implementation is fairly simple. It's just mostly we want RFC for like okay, what validations do we need to build that aren't part of JSON scheme, and we can add those later too. It doesn't need to be a full set right now, but like, get everything in there. And then, yeah, the long tail is definitely going to be actually updating releases to do it, which, we'll probably do some on that our working group is in charge of, just as proof of validation that this is work and is good. But yeah. And then, this sort of unblocks the template rendering, because then we can go provide that as an option. And when release authors go to do that to get actual real sort of concrete benefits for end users, then they'll have this tool to fall back on when they start ripping the validation out of the templates.
One problem I have with template rendering, how we do it now, is a lot of our different releases use things around IPs, and we want to validate that they give us proper CIDRs or IPs. But we like define these templates or these checks for in every single template, right? Because they don't share, like we define them new each time. And then if we update one, we don't update the other to maybe have a little nicety, or they have slightly different error messages, or whatever different unique things we do in each one of them. Go ahead.
One of the built-in types is string, and it has strings can have a format, and one of the built-in formats is IPv4 or IPv6. So you just sort of get that. Now, not CIDRs, we could look at adding, maybe that's something to mention in the RFC. It'd be great if we had a format of CIDR or whatnot. And that seems like something that would be reasonably easy to add, because ideally you don't re-implement those things in every release.
Right. So my question is, in this case, let's say we implement our own CIDR validation. That would just be available to every single job. We wouldn't need to redefine it anyway.
We would have to do it on the Bosch director side.
Right.
But yeah, right. And you also have, regex, whatnot. Like, so individual jobs would have to be like, this is a string, its format is CIDR, or even,
Yeah, that would be really nice.
I guess IPv4 CIDR. Do IPv6s have CIDRs? Probably, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, they have also, but we are switching to IPv6, so
any day now.
It's
2025. It's the year of IPv6.
Okay. Any other questions about RFC or feedback?
Yeah, in general, some examples in there, like in the actual RFC, I think would go a long way.
Yeah, I can add some comments in there. There's also some links to the JSON. The JSON schema site is both good and bad, and they acknowledge this because the whole spec is there, which is generally unreadable. But then there's a lot of like, don't read the spec. Here's a lot of examples. So there's a lot of examples over there, and they step you through the different types and formats and breakdowns of objects and arrays and like composition of things. So there's a good thing there, but I'll add a couple examples for, here's a simple spec file and here's some simple validations for it.
Yeah.
And maybe if you could add like an example timeline that's like, first we include bare bones in Bosch, then everyone can slowly start moving over, and then I don't know, something, so we understand the rollout.
And this is completely not required ever. I think that is our intention. So like there's no real required rollout, but yeah, having a timeline of when we would expect it to be available would be good.
Okay, thank you, Joseph, for joining the meeting to provide more details. I appreciate it. And yeah, was a good discussion. Okay, then we can proceed with any other business. The first we already discussed about Concourse. For your information, we built a promotion view in our foundational infrastructure working group dashboard. So basically you can do this based on the community repository and the labels. So for the moment, the labels are generic for everything, which is for that working group, but most of the time, only promotions are available in case you want to do something like this. I was pinging Ruben and Joseph all the time, and I decided to do this, and we just check during our working group meeting the dashboard. And yeah. So next working group meeting, working group update, which is now to be scheduled, is for Paketo. I will do this this week. And is there anything else you want to discuss? No? Okay, then we are done for today. Then take care and see you next time. Bye-bye.